first made by man some 3,500 years ago in Mesopotamia. Although many glass objects have survived from ancient times, archaeologists have yet to find any of the furnaces in which they were made. Until recently, we could only guess what the factories were like and how early glassmakers went about their work. But in 1968, entirely unexpected evidence came to light. A one-room factory with a single mud brick furnace operating in western Afghanistan. In remarkable ways, it echoes glassmaking from the distant past.
My name is Saidullah. My cousins and I are the only people in Afghanistan who can make glass. Our family has been making glass for 200 years.
The people of Afghanistan are a hardy mixture of mountain and desert types. Almost all are Muslims and very conservative. Like most cities of Central Asia, Herat has had a long and violent history. Alexander built a fortress here. Genghis Khan laid it to waste, leaving only 40 survivors. Because of its remote location, Herat has been largely bypassed by modernization. For many people, the 20th century has hardly arrived. The old ways of doing things are the only ways they know. And so it is at the glass factory on the outskirts of the city. The factory is owned by two cousins, Saifullah and Saidullah. Their language is Dari.
When we were boys, we watched our fathers making glass. The same way my son watches us today. My father was Sabiullah, the master glassmaker, who died at the age of 102. Saidullah's father was Faisullah, who died 6 years ago.
The glassmakers say their family has made glass for 200 years. But many of their practices clearly go back much further. These ancient cuneiform tablets, now in the British Museum, are the only instructions on glassmaking to have survived from antiquity. They were written in the 7th century BC and found at the Assyrian city of Nineveh. Here in the old instructions, ritual is blended with technology. When you set out to build a furnace for making glass, first search for a propitious day in a favorable month. You should set up Kubu images and allow no stranger to enter the building. Before you place the glass in the furnace, you must first sacrifice a sheep and burn juniper incense. Pour out libations of honey and butter when you start the fire. Well, be that as it may, the Herat glassmakers are practical men. Magic plays no part in their work. But much of what the tablets say is recognizable in their work. The two major ingredients are the same. The first is a white quartz pebble collected in a nearby riverbed. The tablets call this imanaku, a whitish stone which looks like river silt dotted with pebbles. The glassmakers call it sangi safid, or simply white stone.
The best stones are the clean white ones, not the brown or gray. Usually, we take 1 donkey load at a time back to the factory, and that lasts us about a week.
The other ingredient of the glass comes from the desert. It is a plant ash called ishkar. This is prepared by nomads in the same way today as it has been for thousands of years. Nomad families work for weeks making ishkar. Abdullah, a Tajik man, gathers the twigs of special plants. The twigs are heaped into pits and burned. The ashes collect in the ground and are left to cool overnight. The next morning, the ishkar is removed from the bottom of the pit. The nomads take it by camel caravan on journeys of several days across the desert. Sometimes they trade it for wheat, and other times they sell it in the bazaars. Most ishkar is used for making soap, but chemical analyses of ancient objects show that ever since glass was first made in this part of the world, plant ashes have been used as one of its ingredients. No matter what one's role in a city like Herat, eventually it brings them to the bazaar, the heartbeat of any Oriental city. When they need ishkar, the glassmakers come to the bazaar to buy it. They test its quality by tasting it and select that which they describe as having a sweet taste.
خان که از اینا معلومه؟
بله هر کدوم یک پوه.
یک
ها
بس کم
5 پوه شده همه.
بزرگ شیرین بود میام تو شما
بسیار
نکجا
خوبه باید بیاین دقم ببریم اگه بکن شما خیلی داریم ما فقط 5-6 دقیقه داریم خوش آمدید خوش آمدید
بخونی
نه زنده باشید خوش آمدید
Afghanistan lacks the natural resources which lead to national prosperity. Beyond the essentials, many things are scarce, and people try to make do with what they have. In Herat, this itinerant tinker can make his living mending broken dishes and teapots. The level of the economy is reflected in the varied means of transportation. Trucks and buses are overburdened. Animals are frequently used to carry cargo. Energy to melt the ingredients is essential to all glassmaking. Hardwood fuel is delivered to the little factory by donkey every 2 weeks.
The only fuel we can use for our furnace is wood, which comes from the hills. We use a lot of it each day, and like everything else, it keeps getting more expensive. The wood is by far the most expensive part of making glass.
Listen again to what the old instructions said 2,700 years ago. If you want to produce tersitu, or bright blue-colored glass, grind finely 10 minas of Imanaku stone. Grind separately 12 minas of the ashes of the naga plant. Mix these together and place the mixture in a furnace which has 4 eyes.
Dito sa iya, mga mali. Saylo, vale. Dito sa iya, vale.
To color the glass blue, the instructions say to add a mysterious ingredient called slow copper compound. It is not known what that was, but the Herat glassmakers do something that seems similar. To make a blue glass, they heat a piece of scrap copper until an oxide forms on the surface. This is scraped off, powdered, and added to the starting mixture. The result is a pleasing blue, the favorite color of glass. The instructions continue. You keep a good fire burning. When the glass assumes the color of a ripe grape, keep it heating for a while longer. Test the glass with the tip of a tool. When it spins a thread, like the wriggling and coiling of snakes, then the glass is ready to be worked.
Many of our tools last a long time, but some, like the wooden paddle, catch fire and burn. It doesn't make any difference though, because it is so easy to make a new one. Our most important tool is the blowpipe. I've heard you can buy these from other countries, but they must be very expensive. So we just use a sawed-off rifle barrel, which works fine.
Ay, Khuda. Aisho, I'll take the look. Vale, huh? Vale. I forget he got about Afghanistan. Vale.
I think this kind of decoration is nice. And this candlestick is one of our best pieces. This is the most expensive piece we make because it uses the most glass. And the tourists like it very much. When the glass is finished, we put it in the back part of the furnace. It is not as hot there as in the front where we melt the glass. Back there, the glass will cool down slowly, which is very important. If hot glass cools too quickly, it will break easily later on. But if it cools slowly, it is much stronger. Our glass is so strong, you can pour boiling hot tea into it, and it will not break. The hardest part of our job is the heat and smoke, because it ruins our eyes and lungs. Before they died, our fathers were crippled and lost their sight. Look at me. I am only 20 years old, but very weak. This business is not very profitable for us, only for the shopkeeper who sells our glass. We are only 2 workers and have 10 people in the house to support. We buy our water, we buy our bread, and after we buy everything else we need, there is nothing left. But we think things will get better. There are many things to see in our city. The fort up on the hill is fallen down now, but our people are rebuilding it. Someday, it will look just like it used to in the old times. Tourists will come to see it, and from all over. And that will be good for the glass business. In our mosque too, it is very beautiful. Our fathers worked here 40 years ago, making glazes for the tiles, because the glazes are made of glass. People will surely come to see our mosque. We have made more than 100 pieces today. The fire can die now, and the glass will be ready to come out in the morning. A good piece of glass shines and has beautiful color. It must also do its job well. It is smooth, not rough. It is thick, not thin. And when you put your hand on it, you will like it.
Saifullah says that he and his cousin will continue to make glass for the rest of their lives. That is their work, and they are proud of it. However, he sometimes seems uneasy about the future. While he would like very much for his son to become a glassmaker, he does not want the boy to suffer the illness and hardship his own father had to bear. Instead, he might send his son to school to study the Quran. And this last surviving link to an ancient way of making glass would come to an end. But things might work out differently. When electrification reaches the village, 2 or 3 small fans could be used to draw off the smoke and make the working area more tolerable. And perhaps one day the glassmaker's dream will come about, that they will have a shop of their own in which to sell their glass. Inshallah, they say, if God wills it.
My name is Bob Brill, and I'm the research scientist at the Corning Museum of Glass. Our expedition was out in Herat in the fall of 1977 to film the Glassmakers. In the film, we referred to the long and violent history of the city. Well, that violence has erupted again, this time in the form of a revolution in April of '78. The country's been pretty much sealed off since then, and it was really several months before people in the West realized that some truly fearful things were happening there. The situation has deteriorated into a full-scale civil war now, and Herat turns out to be one of the centers of the fighting. There are reports of hundreds of people having been killed there. The violence this time seems to have stemmed directly from the conflict between two very powerful human factors. The first is the persistence of the traditional ways of thinking and what we call the old ways of doing things. And the other is simply the onrush of modernization. The trouble is that changes have been thrust upon the country so quickly that people can't absorb them, and they don't know how to deal with them. Of course, we don't know what's become of the Glassmakers. They could very well have been involved in the fighting, but even if they weren't, it seems almost certain that they're no longer making glass. Since the borders are closed, there are no tourists to buy their glass, and it's very doubtful that any of the Afghan people themselves are thinking very much about buying glass these days. So one wonders what will happen when they do pick up their glass making again, if indeed they ever do. You'll remember that the real essence of the film was that this was the only place in the world where glass was still being made by this 3,500-year-old method. That is, starting with the riverbed pebbles and plant ash. Even while we were there, the glassmakers said that they were thinking of giving up this old method. Fuel had become so expensive that they could no longer afford to make glass from scratch every time. So sometimes they just went out into the neighborhood and collected broken bottles and broken window glass and melted these down in their furnace. And then from that molten glass, they could make their own objects. When they start up again, they could very well go over completely to making glass by this easier and less expensive way. So it's entirely possible that the glass making recorded on this film could have been the last time in history that glass was ever to have been made in this way.